In whatever role, generous partner to the Cinema for Peace initiative or entrepreneur, Harald Seiz just wants to make the world a better place. For 8 years, the Schwabian CEO of Karatbars International GmbH has been selling gold to people with smaller budgets, believing the precious metal could be a global currency of the future. His path to success was by no means predestined, given his especially difficult early years. But in hindsight, the entrepreneur with Greek roots puts his perseverance down to his tough childhood.
In den 60er Jahren war das ja so, ich bin aufgewachsen bei meiner Mutter und meiner Großmutter.
I was raised in the 60s by my mother and grandmother. When I was 3 years old, my father returned to Greece. I never saw him again. But back then, foreigners were more or less shunned, especially if you weren't Bavarian like my mother or grandmother. And it was pretty much like people would always say, "Oh, him, he can't do anything anyway." And that always motivated me. Whenever people would say, "That won't work, you can't do that," I would stand up and say, "I'll show you." Obviously, that's the wrong approach. You have to, and this would come later as I developed, you have to feel good about yourself and do things for yourself and obviously for others. But I would always get up again because people would say, "That's impossible." And your biography also underlines how important it is for people to make mistakes in life, because you learn from them and become better as a result. The well-known trial and error system which works so well in America. It's the philosophy of every company over there, but here in Germany we seem to have a problem with it. We're not allowed to make mistakes. We're not allowed to talk about them, and we don't stand by our mistakes because we tend to think, for the love of God, people cannot find out, otherwise I'm finished. Something has to change if we are to remain competitive in the future, right? Yes, absolutely. Okay, so here in Germany, we have a different mentality compared to the USA. In the USA, if you lose everything 3 times and still make it, you're a hero. Here, you're looked upon critically. But if you have nothing, no point of reference, someone, for example, a father, an entrepreneur and so on, to show you how things work, then you have to make mistakes in order to learn from them. There are people who fail to learn from them, but to learn from your mistakes and to develop as a person, that's an important point. And that has to be perceived differently by people, including here in Germany, because here we only have this flock-like behavior, and people follow like sheep. And anybody who claws their way to the top is immediately regarded as an outsider. I've noticed that with some of my friends as well. But it's something I'd like to change, because I haven't changed myself. I'm the same person I always was. Success hasn't changed me, it's just made me stronger.
Ich hat der Erfolg nicht verändert, sondern nur stärker gemacht.
Und auch das will teilen.
It's something he wants to share, to encourage other people to live their dream. Think Big is the title of Harald Seiz's biography, introduced here at the Federal Press Conference. He talks about his humble beginnings, brought up by his mother and grandmother, and how both women had a problem with alcohol. How he went to school, how his thick lenses made him an outsider, and how, with the help of contact lenses and his idol Elvis Presley, of whom he does an outstanding impression, ultimately became the star of the school. But even after school, things didn't go so well at first. The young Harald Seiz tried his hand at various trades, rebelled against the oppression of his teachers, and strived for autonomy and freedom. He founded as a salesman, first for a vacuum cleaner company, then in the financial sector. Today, Harald Seiz is the CEO of a global player. He's realized his dream. He wrote his biography to motivate people to keep pushing forward, even when the going gets tough, to realize visions, even if they seem impossible.
Auch wenn sie noch so irreal scheinen.
Ich möchte den Menschen die Möglichkeit geben,
I want to give people a chance to see that it can still work out, even if you have nothing, or if you don't have a rich father, even if your mother or father aren't business people, that anything is possible if you just keep at it, if you remain focused, and if you follow your own path.
und wie man seinen Weg geht.
In hindsight, do you see the difficult childhood you had as a strain or as a source of motivation? Perhaps it's also the reason you were able to learn how to fight for what you believe in. Yes, I also believe that's the reason. I wanted, whenever people would say, that won't work, or you can't do that, or that's impossible, I always had the feeling inside me that I'd say, yes, I can do it. And that's what always drove me forward. The more people would say that's not possible, the more I pushed forward and got up again and continued to fight. So this book is also about being something of a role model. You're presenting yourself so that the reader at home might think, yeah, why shouldn't that work for me too? I'm now discovering what's right for me and trying to move forward like Harald Seiz. Yes, everyone has to follow their own path. For example, you can't say, okay, you can follow this path to the letter. I'm trying to say that if you enjoy it, and you can say, okay, this is what I want to achieve, that you can do it. Whenever you have your sights set on something, and if you just stay focused and don't get distracted by quote-unquote friends, they don't mean it in a bad way when they say, oh, that's impossible, or it won't work. If you're motivated and want to achieve something, then of course it's possible. You've been through a lot to be where you are now. Yes. In your book, you mention all the different training you've had, the various places where it's not worked out. But is that part of your strength, that you've had to go through so many different stages to get to where you are now? It's a development phase. When you're young, you don't have the experience, and your father isn't around, or you don't have a father who's a businessman to tell you, okay, you can follow this path, and listen, this is how I did it. Then you have to make your own way. And I believe that everyone, with no exceptions, is capable of finding their own path to happiness. Whether that's as a big businessman, or as a father or a mother, whatever makes you happy, anyone can do it. Find happiness in life.
Das kann jeder erreichen, sich wohlzufühlen in seinem Leben.
Aber Sie konnten auch wirklich dadurch, dass Sie
But because you set out to write a less conventional biography, I mean, for instance, primary school, secondary school, university career, that's it, so your life experience is that much bigger. And you also sell that as a plus. Often fragmented biographies are received negatively. But you say no, it doesn't have to be like that. On the contrary, I have experience to draw on and ultimately skills. So obviously, I can go out there with a different set of tools compared with someone who has lived a conventional life.
Ich möchte damit sagen, dass es egal ist, wenn du auch mal.
What I'm trying to say is that it doesn't matter if you fall down. If you make mistakes in life, mistakes are there to learn from. Okay, that might sound like a cliche. You hear it all the time, but it's important. Okay, I know how it doesn't work. So that means I can figure out how it does work. You should never give up. You should always follow your dream and your own path. And you'll get there. A lot of people give up too quickly and say, okay, I'll just conform to society. But if you really want to achieve anything, you can do it using your own strength, using your head, and focusing on your goal.
Mit dem, was im Kopf hat und mit dem Ziel, was vor Augen hat.
And Harald Seiz wouldn't be Harald Seiz if he didn't have another dream for the distant future alongside this current vision of a global currency.
Also, das klingt jetzt vielleicht anmaßend, aber ich möchte,
as presumptuous as it may sound, my goal is for the world population, for everyone, to have at least the basics, food and drink, and what I mentioned before, for the poorest countries in the world to develop. Because this development can't happen overnight. For example, I can't just go to Africa and say, hey, here's a house, you can live there now. That wouldn't work. To foster development, you need the basics. You have to have something to eat and drink and an education. And my aim is to be one of the people, one of the pioneers, to help to achieve that. Can you tell us anything concrete about what you have in mind, how you intend to help people there? For several years, I've been thinking about it. For example, building desalination plants and pipelines in Africa. How do I intend to do that? I still don't know, but that's how every dream starts. And once I start working on it, everything will fall into place. So, coming right back to your core competence, you have gold, which you're working with. And once you've reached the point where you no longer have to worry about it yourself, you intend to move on to another resource, namely water, which is at least as valuable as gold. Absolutely, absolutely. What I want to say is that there is sufficient food for everybody in this world. Okay, water is really a valuable commodity, but there's enough food, enough to eat, enough to feed the entire world population. It's a distribution problem. We need to work on it together. And obviously, as I said, to ensure the basics, that people have water to drink, and then they can also begin to develop. For Harald Seiz, having a dream means always looking for the next challenge, the vision of a pioneer, and his calm glance across the waters of the River Spree already hint at his focus on a new goal. He'll take on the challenge even without a tailwind and against the current.